Yes.
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 Do you believe that God is a power for good?
Yes.
What is your understanding of God, and how did you come about it in your life? In my life, I was raised as a Catholic, and I don't regret that. It gave me a basis. But within myself, I had my own opinions of things, mostly all my life. So when I came to religious science, it kind of resonated with my soul. And in my early upbringing, I learned about the condemning God, that white-haired man in the sky who was going to condemn you to death, to hell, you know. And but in school, I learned from the Sisters of Mercy. Some of them didn't have mercy, but a lot of them did. A lot of them did. And they taught us about the loving, forgiving Jesus. And so that resonated with me. Jesus has always resonated with me. And so when I came to religious science, and I studied from this very worn book as well, and learned the philosophy of Ernest Holmes, who was also reared on the Bible. And so he met with a Thomas Troward, who was a lawyer who studied law. And he also knew other scientists. And so as he studied the Bible, he started to think about it in different ways, according to the laws of nature, according to invisible laws that we believe God is. God is an invisible presence that we believe in. So Ernest took and wrote a philosophy, which he calls the science of mind, a philosophy of faith, and a way of life. And so this is what we study here. You know, this book is so rich. If you don't have it, I encourage you to buy it. And if at first reading you don't understand it, don't put it down. Just pick it up and just flip through it anywhere. This is such a wonderful, wonderful book. He explains God in a scientific and a metaphysical way. And in his glossary in the back of the book, he says science is a knowledge of laws and principles, organized knowledge. The result of science and the revelations of religion are growing closer and closer together. He says that metaphysics is more than a speculative philosophy. It is the science of being, that which is beyond the laws of physics. So in our spiritual nature. So I would like to explore Ernest Holmes' philosophy with you this morning, so that you can open up to a better understanding of God, a deeper understanding of God, and that God is impersonal, yet very personal. You hear us praying and reading from the different Science of Mind books, and you hear a certain language. Well, before reading them, this book here, I suggest you read the glossary. Because there are terms in the glossary that you may not, quite know what he's referring to. So it's good to read what he means. So in the glossary, he describes and explains philosophy. So what is philosophy? Ernest says it's a man's idea of life. Philosophy has been defined as the science of things divine and human. Practical wisdom. Philosophy has always transcended science, for philosophy deals with causes while science deals with effects. Many things which philosophy has taught for thousands of years are today being demonstrated by science. And so Ernest describes God as the presence. What is the presence? He says in the glossary, the presence is God. To meditate upon the presence of God is to indraw the universe in one's own soul. Think about that. God is not a person, but a principle personified in each one of us. Spirituality is the atmosphere of this principle. Religion is its outward form. And so what is principle? God is not a person, but principle. So what is principle? The science of mind is the study of principle of being. That's what it says in the glossary for principle. Is a study of the principle of being. The source or cause from which a thing results. A truth which is unchangeable. We first understand a principle and then relate it to our problem for a final test. He invites us to test this principle. So we say that God is a power for good. How do we know this? Power. In the glossary, he says the energy by which everything lives. The creative medium of spirit is the great mental law of the universe. The universal law of mind. It is the one medium through which all law and all power operate. And man's creative power is marvelous. For every time he thinks, he sets the law in motion. As his thoughts set the law in motion, he is specializing it for some definite purpose. This should give all a sense of freedom and realization that there is neither competition nor monopoly. It leaves each to work out his own salvation, not with fear and trembling, but with calm sense of peace and assurance. Man may transmute as much of the infinite energy into degrees of power he chooses to use. So this science of mind philosophy is empowering to me. It says that God is within me. Whatever good qualities we describe God as are in us as well. If we were made in the image and likeness of this one presence, this one power, this one spiritual being, then we are as God is. Perfect, whole, complete. We are love, we are peace, we are joy, we are prosperous and abundant. We are all that is, and it is our divine birthright. And all we need to do is recognize, allow, accept these gifts that are innately ours. And that power that we have comes from also the one mind that we call God, that there is one universal mind operating through this principle of life. And so if we connect through prayer and meditation and right thinking, which is also known as righteousness, which is right thinking, right living, then we manifest the gifts of creation, the gift of God, the gift of good, God's goodness. For God's goodness belongs to all alike. God's good belongs to all alike. Because we are heir to the kingdom of good, right here and right now. So this is what I've learned from reading this, attending classes, and attending service here, listening to all of the deep messages. But I do encourage you again, to just pick up this book. And if you need prayer for any specific thing, he's got these prayers in here, beautifully written, for different health conditions. I mean, just in such an affirmative way. It's just, this teachings have really, really changed my life for good. You know, there was a time, in my life, was kind of going through a really rough time. About 20-some years ago, 25 years ago, and so when I found religious science. And I have never looked back, because it took me from woe is me to where I stand today. And that's a far cry. And that's a miracle. That's a miracle, too. So, let's see. So, with some knowledge, we begin to realize that this power and this presence is in back of everything. Everything that lives, moves, and has its being in this universe. This power and this presence is even in a rock, in the mountains, in the ocean. It is everywhere, in everyone and everything. It is the source. And that we are one with this source. So when I talk about the powers within, and it operates through that one mind, I'm talking about divine principle. And so the divine principle is spiritual causation operating through universal law, such as the power of right thinking, that it cancels and erases everything unlike itself. So the power of right thinking. So despite your circumstances, despite your condition, despite any situation in your life, change your thinking, change your life. Our dear friend Louise Hay, she was a religious science minister, and she wrote many, many, many books. And she was the one that I first read that led me here. So a friend of mine said, oh, you like Louise Hay, you like reading Louise Hay. Well, there's this church that you can go to, and that's what they teach. And I'm like, really? So I know the first time I went to a religious science church, I felt like I went home. So divine principle, place no limit on the principle. It answers every question, solves every problem. It is the solution to every difficulty. We are not limited, not by principle, but by our own ability to see perfection. One who understands the use of divine principle never tries to suggest or personally influence another. Think about that.
Say that again.
One who understands the use of divine principle never tries to suggest or personally influence another. If you understand that divine principle is in each and every one of us, it is that one mind that guides and guards, and then how can we try to personally influence another? We all have our own unique connection with that power within. We may not understand why certain people do certain things, or say or act, but we know, and we have to see them as God's face and know that God is within them as well. We can't make decisions for other people, though we try. We try. And that kind of way of being drove me crazy, trying to control my ex at one time when he was acting out in his addictions. So it beat me up, because you cannot control. You're not the cause of their problems, you're not the cure of their problems, and you can't control their problems. That's what we say. So because there is a God. And how are we to know what their path is supposed to look like? We don't know. We can only imagine. And so you talk about this divine principle, this power, this presence. Within each and every one of us, there's a divine individuality. which Ernest calls the real ideal of man, a distinguished from the outer personality. Each one is a separate entity in mind, and no two are alike. Each is a personalized center of God consciousness. We are born with our individuality. Our personality is the use we make of our own divine individuality. That sounds like a mouthful, and it is. It is. But our individuality, or our personality, as it says here, it is a personalized center of God consciousness. Our personality is the use we make of our divine individuality. So what is personality? Ernest describes personality as that which constitutes distinction of person. Personality is the result of man's experience. It is the sum total of all he has said, done, felt, thought, hoped for, and believed in. It is the result of his reactions to the events of life. Factors to be considered in the development of personality are heredity, race suggestion, environment, child training, education, autosuggestion, and indeed anything and everything that impinges upon our consciousness. So you see, our personality is developed over time in our life through our upbringing and what we've been exposed to, what we witnessed. You know, little children are like little mimics, if you notice that. They copy. They copy the adults and the children around them, the older children. They copy. And so thereby they're forming their personality. But in God, we are individualized expressions of the whole. It says here, therefore, we are what we are largely because of the nature of our accumulated consciousness. Personality is the objective evidence of individuality. Our personality is the use we make of our divine individuality. Just as a fine architect uses only the best materials and plans most carefully how to construct his building, so should we, in the building of personality, choose most carefully the kind of materials we wish to use. Each one builds according to the pattern of his own desires. So when we become old enough to realize how we are showing up in the world, if it's some way less than acceptable in our own minds and we don't like some of the ways we are in our personality, the personality can be altered or changed. So therefore, changing our realities. So if we want to show up in a better way to the world, then we take accountability for what we think, what we say, and what we do. We suit up and we show up. We get real. We get real. And when we get real with a capital R, we show up as our divine individuality, the divine self, the way we were created to be before the world got a hold of us. That loving presence, that peaceful presence. And again, we are human. And what they say, to err is human. Yeah. So this is a way of life philosophy, a practice. Myself and several other ones here are practitioners, licensed practitioners here at this center. We're practicing And each and every one of you here who practice the philosophy of science of mind are practitioners as well. You practice it in your own life and affairs. Practice, practice, practice. It takes years of practice to get this and to live this. It's not easy, but it is rewarding. Because when we know the truth of who we are and whose we are, we can live a much easier life, even with stuff going on around us. And thank you, Ginger, for sharing your story this morning. Even with stuff going on around us. And for myself, my brother was in the hospital for 3.5 months. He just got out at the beginning of April. You know, I had to practice, and I had to call on my practitioner friends to pray with me and for my brother, to see his truth, when at times it was hard, when you're facing the facts, right? The facts of the medical condition. It's hard to see that truth. But what does Ernest say that truth is? Truth, he says, that which is. It is the reason, the cause, and the power in and through everything. Truth with a capital T. It is birthless, deathless, changeless, complete, perfect, whole, self-existent, causeless, almighty God, spirit, law, mind, intelligence, and anything and everything that implies reality with a capital R. It is birthless, deathless, and changeless. So when we look at each other, we see the physical appearance. But if you really look at each other and try to see the face of God, the perfection of that individual, the perfection in that divine individuality that we're witnessing, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. It says the truth is that which is, and being that which is, it must be infinite and all. Being infinite and all, the truth can have nothing outside itself other than itself, or unlike itself, by which to divide itself. Consequently, the spirit is indivisible, changeless, and complete within itself. It is all that is both cause and effect. It is the Alpha and the Omega. So when we talk about our truth, we're declaring our oneness with God. Because if God is eternal, and God is immortal, and God is infinite, then so are we. He said we are spirit beings having a human experience. I know that through this philosophy, it has helped me to know God, and therefore to believe in God. And through some practices that I've done, I've learned to embody that at a deeper level. And so I invite you all to do the same for yourself, to embody a concept of God that works for you, that empowers you, propels you to create a new and enjoyable life for yourself. And in doing so, I was asked one time to write a declaration of my spiritual reality. So that's like affirming that God is a principle and a presence within you. So how could you write a declaration for yourself? I invite you to do that. Somewhere in your life, in your time, space and time, quiet time with God. Connect with God. And think of all the things that God is. all the good, and then put I am in front of those words. Those two little words, I am, are the most powerful words you could ever use. And so, I ask you to close your eyes and imagine that you are saying this to yourself. For this is a declaration of spiritual reality. I believe in God.
I believe in God.
Say it to yourself in your mind. The one Spirit, the first cause of all there is. God is all there is. I believe I am an effect of that first cause. Spirit made manifest in human form. Therefore, I am both human and divine. I am a spiritual being having a human experience on this journey through life. I am made in the image and likeness of God. I am all that God is. I am one with God. God is the essence of my being. I am a channel, a vessel through which God expresses. All that is for my highest good, comes to me now. And through me, God is unconditional love. And when in the midst of chaos, I know all is well. I am loved. I am supported. I am an expression of the loving God when I give up control, self-will, and the ego. I experience my divine nature. I am at peace. I am safe and serene. I am confident. God lives and expresses itself through my being. As I become aware of this, it's like my mind, my eyes, my ears are opened, and I notice more and more how God is within me, expressing and within everyone else and everything. God is in all that is, in every situation. I am one with all. I am open to receive my inheritance, my divine birthright. I allow God to work through me. God is my strength, my vitality, my courage. God expresses itself in all these, as well as in joy, peace, happiness, abundance, vibrant health, prosperity, wisdom, and clarity. I believe this is the truth of my being. And to the extent that I embody the truth, I inherit the kingdom of God here on earth. All that is for my highest good, and it already exists. So as I believe, so I receive. As I develop the conscious contact with God through meditation, I am creating the space for more and more good to come, to and through me. I am becoming receptive, and I believe. And so it is.
So